Alright guys, so as you can see, this is sort of part 2 of this video of the AJE cross member on a 68, 67, 68 Mustang Cougar. Both the same basic car. The only difference between the Cougar and the Mustang was about 2.5 inches behind the driver's and passenger seat to the back seat kind of area there. But everything else, chassis or unibody wise, is identical. You know, the Cougar came with a couple of different sort of heavier duty components in the steering and suspension compared to the Mustang in some instances, but you know, that's about it really. So anyways, what we've done is we've taken the engine out, we pulled the motor, we basically unbolted, took the inspection cover off of the transmission, spun the crank by hand with a big socket, and what we did was we you know, undid the flywheel, so that way it's pretty easy. We don't worry about pulling out the transmission. We also don't have to worry about possibly damaging the pump on the torque converter with the splines or anything like that. And it's also a lot easier to pull out than pulling the whole transmission and engine all as one piece. As you know, with the AJE kit, you don't really have to do that. So I'm going to flip the camera around and show you sort of you know, where we're starting now. So as you see here, we got the engine pulled. It's on the stand. This engine's only got about 100 or so miles on it. It's a fully built Ford Racing 302. No longer Ford Racing now it's Ford Performance, I think it is. But anyways, so there she is. Now, as you know, when you're doing the AJE kit, you have to change the pan from a front sump to a rear sump. So what we have to do is get a you can get an aftermarket pan, or you can get a pan from like a 79 Fairlane 302, which has the rear sump with the oil pan, or with the oil tube port basically on the side of the pan. So that way you can put your dipstick port, I should say, on the back of the pan. So basically what you want to do is once you change that pan out, as you see where the old dipstick goes down into the front of the timing chain cover, we're going to pull that out and plug that somehow. Some people use a dowel. What I might do is find a piece of steel rod or something like that, and you know, make something for it to sort of press in. Alright, so it'll make it look a little nicer than a wooden dowel anyways, but we'll see when we get to that point. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the car. As you see, again, like I said, everything else is sort of taken apart, and we've just sort of sat those in place. Now, some people make the mistake of not reading the instructions properly, which the instructions aren't totally detailed with AJE, but they take the little ring or off the top of that and put it on the top side of the shock tower mounts, but you don't do that. So it's just straight bolts go straight through into the top of the shock towers. So we're not going to bother cutting this out, because we're just going to use our 302. We're eventually on our 302, we're going to probably put like a Holley Sniper EFI on there, and later on down the road, if we do decide to go to a Coyote motor or something like that, then when we pull that motor out, we can then cut those and weld in the sheet. Basically, you know, cut them, and you know, from here down on the angle, and then weld in, you know, a piece of 14 gauge or whatever it is, I can't remember. So anyways, what we're gonna do here now is took the engine mounts off, unbolted them just to make it a little bit easier. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go in and we're gonna try with the grinder. Might have to use a spot weld drill, and we got to drill out the spot welds on the engine mounts, both sides underneath the frame rail, and then you got to go up here and you got to do the same. You can see the spot welds are pretty easy to see. You either grind them out, drill them. There's another one there, big one there, all the way around. Some guys say drilling them is easy. Some guys say using a drill and an air hammer, something like that, is easy. So we're going to try the grinder first, just sort of see how that works. Only because I don't have the air hammer here at the shop, left it at the other place. But again, same thing on the other side. Drill or grind these out and go from there. Another instance too that's been talking on a forum or the Facebook Colt AJE 45 or 65, sorry. What do you want to call it? Page on Facebook is with the 68, 69, 70 columns. They have a rag joint on them instead of going directly into the steering box. So what you have to do is, this is actually splined underneath this. This was press fit on at factory. All right, and what you have to do is you got to take a grinder, carefully grind through this way to the shaft. Don't go all the way through. Just, you know, you can probably hit it with a hammer and a screwdriver or something and split it apart after you've grinded, you know, a line most of the way down that flange there, as you can see on the back side. And then pull that off. That'll give you a 1 inch, or sorry, 3/4 inch, it should be, sorry, a 3/4 inch by 36 spline for your U-joint. All right, so then what you do after that is you also get a 1 inch, 1x2 inch bearing. You can get them from Mustang. Steve does them for the 3/4 inch shaft, steering shaft, or the 1 inch steering shaft. Anyway, so what we have to do is we got to basically cut this inner tube just back a bit. What we'll do is we'll use probably a die grinding wheel, pull the shaft out once we get the flange off, pull the steering shaft out, then take a die grinder from the inside, grind this inner tube back here, and then that way the bearing can push through into about where that line is, if you can see. Sorry, I'm trying to hold the camera and look at what I'm doing at the same time. Push the bearing through and probably tack weld the outer side of the bearing, because I think this is 2 1/8, and good luck trying to find a bearing that is exactly 2 1/8 OD with a 1 inch bore. So anyways, once you push that on and you tack weld that on this side, you use a bearing, I guess you call it bearing stop. It's kind of like a 2-piece sort of clamshell thing with bolts that go through on either side, and that'll clamp and bolt onto the shaft and stop that bearing ever from coming forward, and also stops the steering shaft from going up. All right, so that's a little bit of detail on that. Also, what we'll do is we'll get rid of, you know, some of the stuff like the speedo cable, because we do have a digital GPS gauge for our speed, so we'll get rid of that. Brake booster is going to come out, because with the new brakes we do have a new Willwood master cylinder and proportioning valve, so those will come out, and we'll do all that you know, once we cut and get rid of these off of the shock towers, the engine mounts off the shock towers there. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to get to work, cut those, and then we'll touch base back with you and go from there.